If you ever felt trapped in a relationship you knew was hurting you, you're definitely not alone. And it's not just about the trauma bond, even though that's definitely part of it. You see, there's a whole system working underneath where survival instincts, emotional wounds, and manipulation all come into play. And today we're going to break down 3 ways the narcissist hijacks that system and rewrites your instincts to keep you stuck. By the end of this video, you'll see why it felt impossible to leave and why it was never about weakness. Welcome to the Common Ego community. My name is Christina, and I help people recover from toxic relationships. If you're struggling to move on after a toxic relationship, I have a free quiz that can show you exactly what's keeping you stuck. You'll find the link for that in the description below. So now let's start with the first way your survival instincts get hijacked inside these relationships. The freeze and fawn response. When instability first creeps in, when the connection that once felt so solid suddenly feels shaky, your nervous system doesn't immediately tell you to run. It tells you to patch it, to smooth it over, to do whatever you have to do to make it work, to make you feel whole again. And when fight or flight doesn't feel like an option, your survival instincts have 2 other ways to respond, and that is freeze or fawn. You've probably heard of them before. So freeze is when you shut down and you hope the threat will pass without drawing any more attention. And fawn is when you scramble to fix things. So you're adapting, appeasing, trying to restore the peace before the crack grows any wider. So both responses are instinctive, but neither is a conscious choice. It's your nervous system reacting faster than your mind can process what's happening. And a lot of the times it happens so early on that you don't even realize it. So maybe they made a cruel joke at your expense in front of other people. And when you pulled away, they told you that you were too sensitive. We've all heard that before, right? Or maybe they gave you the silent treatment over something really, really small and seemingly insignificant. And then you felt a sudden coldness in the air, but you didn't know how to bridge that distance. So on the surface, it might have looked like you brushed it off. Maybe you even convinced yourself it wasn't a big deal. But underneath, your system had already registered the damage, and your instincts had already kicked into high gear, trying to patch over the crack as fast as possible, trying to just make things okay again. And the difficult part is it's never just about that one moment. It's about what that moment touched inside of you. So it could be fear of humiliation, of abandonment, or of feeling insignificant, like you didn't matter to that person at all. And when these old wounds get triggered, survival instincts don't waste time analyzing. They push you towards whatever feels like it will bring relief, even if it's temporary and even if it's coming from the same person who caused the crack in the first place. And so, this is why in a relationship with a narcissist, freeze and fawn responses can show up in ways that don't always look like fear. They can look like patience or loyalty or giving someone the benefit of the doubt over and over again. So, on the surface, it can seem like you're tolerating things you shouldn't. But underneath the surface, your nervous system is doing exactly what it's wired to do, trying to hold the pieces together with whatever patches it can find. And this absolutely doesn't mean that you agreed with what was happening. And it also doesn't mean that you didn't see the harm. It means your survival instincts were prioritizing connection over confrontation. But the survival response doesn't stop there. It gets reinforced over time. And that's the second way the narcissist hijacks your system, through emotional conditioning. So now let's talk about why freeze happens and how early patterns can shape it. So freeze and fawn responses don't show up out of nowhere. They're survival strategies your nervous system learned, often long before you could name what was happening. So if you grew up around unpredictable love, where connection sometimes comes with guilt or withdrawal, or sharp criticism, you learned early on that safety wasn't about being heard. It was about smoothing things over and patching every crack before they split wide open. And when those same fractures started to show up again in this relationship, when the warmth cooled and the ground under you felt less certain, Your system didn't push you to leave. It pushed you to survive it. But survival instincts aren't just emotional reactions, they're physical processes built deep into the wiring of your nervous system. So there's something called polyvagal theory that explains this. And in simple terms, your nervous system has different settings, kind of like channels it flips between depending on whether it feels safe or threatened. So when you feel safe, you're in what's called the social engagement system. You stay curious and open. And when you're in this system, you're able to think clearly and connect with others. But when safety feels threatened, your system shifts automatically. And it doesn't stop to ask your permission. It just simply shifts into survival mode. And sometimes that means fight or flight. But when those don't feel possible, especially when connection feels tied to survival, it can push you into freeze or fawn. You don't think your way into these responses, you feel your way into them. So you shut down, appease, rationalize, and do whatever you can to patch over the damage, telling yourself that the connection is still strong enough to hold. Because again, surviving that crack feels more urgent than confronting it. If you can relate to this is probably your built in survival strategy. And the longer you live in that survival state, patching and hoping, minimizing and adapting, the more invisible the damage becomes. At some point, you're not just surviving moments, you're surviving the reality of the relationship itself. And once that pattern of patching and adapting is fully in place, the deepest hijack of all happens. When the trauma bond forms and ties survival directly to the person who's causing all the cracks. By the time you're stuck in that cycle, you're not just reacting to the surface anymore. You're caught in something much deeper. So a trauma bond forms when the same person who hurts you is also the person who gives you moments of relief from that hurt. The person causes the cracks and then offers just enough patchwork to make you believe it can be whole again. And your nervous system, already wired to prioritize survival, starts tying connection and danger together. So the highs and lows and the sudden swings between tenderness and cruelty, they create kind of an emotional whiplash that's incredibly hard to break free from. It's the exact same pattern that makes gambling so addictive, or that keeps people endlessly scrolling on social media, chasing the next unpredictable hit of validation. Because intermittent reinforcement, specifically those random bursts of kindness, wires the brain to stay hopeful, even in the face of repeated harm. And it's not just about wanting them to change. It's about needing the relief they offer, those tiny patches, to feel like you can stay upright just a little longer. The more you invest in patching and hoping, the harder it becomes to imagine facing the brokenness without them, because walking away feels like losing the only thing that's holding it all together. And that's not weakness, that is survival wired by fear, hope, and emotional conditioning, until it feels like the only way to be okay is to stay connected to the person who's hurting you. But even knowing all of this, even seeing the damage clearly, doesn't automatically set you free. Because by the time the trauma bond takes hold, survival instincts have already rewritten the rules inside you. And that's why logic alone is not enough to break free. And I'm sure if you've been in this place, you know this very well. So now let's talk about why logic isn't enough. Once the trauma bond takes hold, seeing the truth isn't the hard part anymore. You notice the lies. You feel the cracks widening under your feet. You know something is deeply wrong. But knowing isn't the same as feeling free to act. Because by then, your nervous system isn't just chasing connection, it's chasing the tiny patches that helped you survive. And survival always has and always will feel more urgent than logic. And that's why thinking harder didn't fix it. It's why lining up every betrayal, every cruel comment, or every broken promise still wasn't enough to break that pull. Because when you're trauma bonded, the brain isn't working with clear evidence anymore. It's working with hope. Unfortunately, toxic hope. It's also working with fear. And it's working with a history of cracked foundations, patched just enough times to make you believe that maybe, just maybe, if you hold on a little longer, things can still be saved. And you can know exactly how the story goes. You can predict the next blow before it lands, and you'll be right 100% of the time. You can tell yourself 100 times that you deserve better, and you'll be right. But in the next moment, you find yourself explaining all the harm away, minimizing it, or telling yourself it's not that bad, that it'll get better next time. Because at that point, survival isn't about thriving, it's about holding the pieces together, even if you're breaking underneath. And until you start to feel safe enough, not just to see the cracks, but to stop mistaking patchwork for healing, your survival system will keep pulling you back, no matter how much you know better. The truth is, you absolutely weren't weak for surviving the best way you knew how. Freeze, fawn, and the trauma bond itself, none of it was a sign that you failed. It was a sign that your nervous system was doing exactly what it was trained to do, to protect you. But survival isn't where your story has to end. Because just like your mind and body learn to tie safety to instability, you can also learn something new. And healing isn't about punishing yourself for the ways you coped. It's about helping your system feel safe enough to stop patching what's broken and to start building something stronger. And that takes more than logic and insight. It takes real step by step rewiring, giving your mind and body new experiences of safety, clarity, and self trust. And that's exactly why I created the Breakthrough Intensive. It's a fully supportive program to help you break free from the trauma bond, rebuild your inner foundation, and stop feeling trapped in cycles you didn't choose. So, if you're ready for that kind of deeper support, I'll link the details below. And no matter what path you take from here, just know this: the cracks you were trying to patch were never proof that you were broken. They're proof that you survived. And now you get to decide how the next part of your story is written. You weren't weak for staying, you were wired for survival. And the relationship exploited that at every turn. And if you want to understand exactly how that wiring works, how the trauma bond hijacks your brain and body, I'll link to a deeper dive here. You deserve to know the truth about what happened to you, and it can be freeing in itself. So click the video that just popped up on the screen, and don't forget to like this video before you go if you haven't already, and I'll be back again soon.